Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hamburger. I am your mental curator, Johnny Hamburger. Thank you so much for listening. For you listening on the radio, you can catch the Geek Therapy Radio podcast just by that name in your favorite podcast app. So, of course, the iHeartRadio app, Spreaker, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts for Android and for other devices. Whatever your favorite podcast app is, type in Geek Therapy Radio Podcast, look for the red, white, and black color scheme, and that's how you know you've got Geek Therapy Radio. The one and only Geek Therapy Radio with your mental curator, Johnny Hamburger. So that's the podcast taken care of. Last plug I will make is for the social media, of course. Geek Therapy Radio on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, TikTok. I put TikToks up there now. That's just the way it is these days. Begrudgingly dragging and kicking and screaming into the vertical video format. Not to say that I don't obviously release, 16 by 9 or even wider aspect ratios on YouTube in traditional formats, but yeah, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, I've started to do the vertical videos. So anyways, all the social media, all the YouTube, all the TikTok, again, just type in Geek Therapy Radio Podcast, and that's your best way to get at me. Thank you so much for your birthday wishes. I just recently in August turned 39 years old. Last year of my dirty 30s. Quick story I want to tell you real quick before we get into the topics of the day. I'm going to talk about smartwatches, hopefully, smartphones, hopefully, maybe my drone, Artemis launch, all sorts of things. USS Texas moving to Galveston for intensive repairs and restoration. But the short story I wanted to tell you real quick is about turning 39 years old. I know there's a lot of you listening right now to the podcast and to the broadcast who either have 39 years to look forward to, like look forward to turning 39 years, or you're listening, you're thinking, dang, what I wouldn't give to be 39 again, sonny. So for all of you, here's the thing, for the older listeners, for the elders who I respect, so the 40-year-olds and above, you remember what it was to be 39, but you also remember what it was to be, in your 20s. Remember what it was to be 18, 19 years old. And the thing is for me, and I think a lot of my listeners, no matter what age you are, if you're more advanced in age than the younger listeners, you still feel 18 in your heart. Like I still feel in my heart and mind that I'm 17 or 18 years old. Maybe I have a little bit more experience that 39 years on the earth brings you, all the grinds and the up and downs and the good and bads and divorce and all sorts of things, all sorts of life experiences. You get a lot of that under your belt. So I think that I'm a little wiser at 39 years old, but my heart still feels like I'm 17. Like I still look, for instance, I went to South Dakota, Wyoming region, the Black Hills region of the United States recently, went to Devil's Tower, and at the base of Devil's Tower is a large boulder field. Basically, the erosion and the boulders fall off Devil's Tower. It has this huge, probably quarter-mile long at least, boulder field. It's actually immense. It's incredible to see this, how big and large and wide and long the boulder field is. And I'm sitting there watching a group of 3 or 4 teenagers just kind of galloping across the boulder field like gazelles. These boulders are anywhere from the size of your fist to the size of school buses. These are huge, multi-ton, 100-ton boulders that these youths are just trouncing and frolicking upon like they're just mountain goats. In my first inclination, the first thing that came to my mind, the first feeling was, oh, I'll do that. When I'm done doing, taking pictures, I'm going to walk across this boulder field. But here's where the 39 years old kicks in. Here's where the more advanced years kick in. Your bones in your lower back, in your lower back muscles, in your lower back tendons, in your lower back bones, I seem to be stuck on the lower back, are just like, hey, not a good idea. Let me remember that I'm here. Remember that you've been sitting in an office chair for the past 20 some odd years sitting sedentary lifestyle. Remember that maybe you should have jogged more, maybe you should exercise more. Either way, bro, you are not going to be galloping across this boulder field like a 17-year-old. Even though in your heart you feel like it, lower back's like, hey, it's like nudging you. Hey, dude, no. So that was a month ago, and even more recently, last weekend, right after I turned 39 years old. I know that I'm touching on something very sensitive for a lot of men, especially. We still, in our heart, we feel like young bucks. Our bones are just like no luck. So anyways, I put the skateboard in the car, just turned 39 years old, skateboard in the car, WD-40, the bearings, got my skate tool, made sure the trucks were right, everything like that. And I put my son, almost 2 years old son, in the back seat, wife in the front seat, said, let's go to the skate park. There's a skate park nearby. We've lived here for 2 or 3 years. We haven't ever been to the skate park. I'm feeling like going to the skate park. So, skateboard in the car, my bike helmet, since I don't have a skateboard helmet anymore, I put the bike helmet in the car. I was like, yeah, let's just go cruise around in the skate park. Remember, this is a Saturday afternoon that I decided to do this. And we got to the skate park in Missouri City. It's like a community park. I kid you not, 20 or 30,000 people there easily. Every soccer game in the country was happening at this Missouri City public park. And the skate park that's attached to it near the playground had a bunch of kids on those razor scooters, like going 15 feet in the freaking air and twirling these razor scooters around like, holy crap. So it was really crowded. And I took it as a little nudge from God himself saying, bro, maybe you need to prepare a little bit more before you go to the skate park. Maybe today's not your day to go to the skate park. So I will make it to the skate park. All right, next segment. Let's talk about smartphones for a little bit. You're listening to Geek Therapy Radio. I'm your mental curator, Johnny Hamburger, and we will be right back. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hamburger. GeekTherapyRadio.com to get in direct contact with me or all the social media. Twitter is a really good way to get into instant touch with me. Geek Therapy Radio podcast on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, just all the social media. Type in Geek Therapy Radio podcast. Look for the red, white, and black color scheme, and that's me. Same thing for your favorite podcast apps. Google Podcasts, Apple Podcast, of course, the iHeartRadio app, Spotify, whatever you want to listen to the podcast with. Geek Therapy Radio Podcast. Look for the red, white, and black color scheme, and that's me. All right, at the end of the last segment, I teased that we would get into talking about smartphones for a little bit. So those of you who are longtime listeners of Geek Therapy Radio, I have mentioned time and time again that while I think the actual technology of smartphones, like what smartphones represent, is an incredible achievement in the progress of human technology and of computation, of video, of camera, like it all comes together. It really is an all-in-one device that has replaced so many things in your life. It's all in your pocket. You have instant access to all of human knowledge, but has that made us any smarter? No! No, in fact, misinformation is at an all-time high. It is a real human struggle. 90% of what you listen to on any radio station or coming out of any TV program or on any social media site is riddled, enlaced, and pocked and bored out and holed like Swiss cheese with misinformation. And I'm not saying that. I'm not telling you turn off the radio. Absolutely not. I'm broadcasting to you on the radio. And I don't mean to get on this tangent, but I'm just telling you, TV, radio, social media, if you're getting all of your information from one source or one particularly biased source, either left or right, you are not getting the complete picture. You are getting an incomplete understanding of the social issues of the day, of the news of the day, of socioeconomic issues, of energy issues, of any sort of issue of the day. If you are getting all your information from one left or right-leaning source, and that's it, suffice to say you know 10% of it. You know 10% of the story, and you're making your judgments and your opinions and your whole worldview based on emotion and only 10% of the facts. Just put that into your brains that if you spend all day listening to the radio, all day listening to the TV, all day on your smartphone, doom scrolling through Facebook and Twitter and such, that your view of the world is by its very nature flawed and incomplete. Rant over. Smartphones. Back to the technology of smartphones. The reason I went off on that rant is that when Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone way back around 2007, 2008-ish, we had no idea the implications it would have for humanity. Without the smartphone, you would not have Facebook as you know it. You would not have social media as you know it. A device that people can be on all day, every day, scrolling and consuming the wrong information from highly biased sources. It's not, in that regard, it's not great. But the technology of it is very fascinating. And the rant coming all the way back around to my opinion of smartphones is that the technology is very cool and very fascinating. But for smartphones themselves don't excite me, because to me, smartphone technology is kind of plateaued. Yes, cameras incrementally get better and better, and processors get a little faster, which is kind of a cat and mouse chase, trying to run after your own tail with software getting bigger and more demanding. It's just kind of, you need more power to run the bloated software. The bloated software gets more bloated. You need more power, but you could just have any really efficiently coded software and you wouldn't really need to have any extra power. That's all fine and dandy. And that's all that I'm saying is that smartphones are kind of plateaued. So what I mean by that is this. If your smartphone is 5 years old, maybe a little older, you're fine. I have a Samsung Galaxy Note 9, and it is every bit as useful and functional as the newest Samsung S22. It's every bit as useful as a new iPhone 13. If you have an iPhone, let's say you have an iPhone 12, and you're thinking about getting the iPhone 14 when it comes out, there's not $1,000 of difference. That's all I'm getting at. Between a 3, 4, 5-year-old device and a brand new device, there is just functionally and usability-wise, there's almost zero difference between my Galaxy Note 9 from 2018, I think it came out, and the S22 that's come out, I think, this year in 2022. There's not $1,000 of difference. There's not a reason for me to go out and spend $1,300 on a new S22, Galaxy S22, because there's just not $1,300 of difference between that and my Note 9. So smartphones, obviously by my passion about this and my butthurt about it all, don't impress me much. Don't impress me much. Shania Twain song? All right, am I dating myself? I just did turn 39 years old. So I'm about to cuck myself a little bit. I am in the market for another smartphone. I am perusing the Amazons and the Micro Centers and the reviews and the blogs and the posts and the videos about a possible successor to my Galaxy Note 9. And here's my reasoning. I just spent the last few minutes going off on a rant tangent, but also telling you how unimpressive smartphones are to me as far as year-to-year changes. What's got me looking at the idea of a new smartphone isn't that I need one necessarily. It isn't that a new, like an S22 or iPhone 14, whatever's going to come out next. It isn't that it has something that I'm just like, oh wow, that's a game changer feature that I definitely need to sell my 5-year-old smartphone for and get this brand new one. There's nothing like that. But out of necessity, out of strong desire, there is one smartphone in particular, and this would help shape what I'm talking about a little bit more, to tell you the smartphone that I'm heavily leaning towards. The Sony Xperia Sony Xperia 1 Mark IV. Sony sucks at naming their devices. Sucks. Do you hear that, FCC? Sucks. Can I say sucks 4 times in a row? Just did. Sucks 5 times. They suck at names changing. 6 times. So the Sony Xperia 1 Mark IV, and the reason why I'm leaning towards that is my job. I work for the Houston Museum of Natural Science. I am the YouTube manager, one of the videographers. I do a whole lot more with cameras now. You remember, if you're been listening to the show for a while, my most recent camera purchase, standalone camera, mirrorless camera purchase, was the Panasonic Lumix S5, which is an exceptional camera, exceptional at video and exceptional at photos as well. But I use it mainly for video. It can record at up to 5.9K. If you're using an Atmos Ninja, you can record at 5.9K, 10-bit, if not 12-bit, RAW or ProRes. You can even record in B-RAW for Blackmagic material, whatever. It's an incredible camera. I have a couple of cine lenses for it, a 14 millimeter Rokinon cine lens and a 85 millimeter Rokinon cine lens for like awesome portraits and background bokeh or bokeh, however you want to put it. Really good lenses, nice, sharp, awesome looking camera. But my recent trip to Wyoming, I was thinking, you know what? This is a whole lot of gear to be lugging around, and not that I would leave the S5 behind for big time professional shoots where I have a lot of time to prep. But I'm like, you know what? Is there a smartphone out there now that has professional camera features, both for photography and for cinematography? And my search has landed on the Sony Xperia 1 Mark IV. I'm getting to the end of this segment here, and I'm going to talk more about the Sony Xperia 1 Mark IV in the next segment because it bears more description. Why am I so interested in this phone? Like, what is it about it that has me interested or thinking that I might need it in some capacity? It's the camera/cameras and the focal lengths. We will talk about that in a moment. You're listening to Geek Therapy Radio. I'm your mental curator. Sorry I got a little butt hurt in this segment, but it's what I do sometimes. Freedom of speech, baby. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Can't even talk. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You got your mental curator, Johnny Hamburger. I just got done wolfing down some chicken wings. You know, something that Ramon Robles, who is one of the first people to teach me radio way back in 2009 when I first started at 790 KBME, doing Astros games and such, and doing the Charlie Palillo show. Remember Charlie Palillo? Oh, God bless Charlie Palillo. I miss Charlie. When I got my first start in radio, 4 p.m. shift, that's what I did, 790. I cut my teeth on the Charlie Palillo radio show. Oh, man. Memories. But I don't know, I got off on this tangent. Oh, yeah, buffalo wings. I just got done eating buffalo wings, and something that Ramon and especially Ramon, maybe Michael Berry likes to bring this up sometimes, but they always kind of ask the question, or Ramon does at least on Twitter he does. Bone in or bone out? Does that make you a real man if you eat boneless chicken wings? What do you think? Is it not that you got to test manliness against anybody else, or that, it's so unwoke? Oh, that's unwoke of me to say. But you don't need to prove yourself with bones in or bone out chicken wings. I prefer bone in chicken wings, and I just got done munching on bone in chicken wings. Buffalo sauce, hot buffalo sauce, and they were delicious, and that's why I stumbled over my words at the beginning, because I had just swallowed a beautiful, nice piece of buffalo chicken. Now, here's the thing. Bone-in chicken wings, bone-out chicken wings, and I promise I'll talk about the Sony Xperia 1 Mark IV here in a moment. You can Twitter poll all you want, bone-in or bone-out. It's not like you're going to see a bowl of boneless chicken wings there, covered in just delicious buffalo sauce with just the right amount of heat to it, just out of the oven. The inside of that chicken is like a perfect 165 degrees. There's a little bit of steam coming off of it. It was prepared by one of the best chefs in Houston. It's just amazing chicken wings that happen to be boneless. You're gonna eat them. you're gonna eat those boneless buffalo wings. You're just gonna. There's nobody who answers a Twitter poll, I prefer bone in, is gonna turn down delicious boneless buffalo wings. They're just not gonna do it. I know I wouldn't do it. I'll say, yeah, I prefer bone in, but I will stuff my face with bone in. That just means you can eat them faster. You're not gonna worry about a bone in there. Anyways, I digress. Maybe I should ask that on my own Twitter. Bone in or bone out buffalo wings, and then put a third option, vegan. Doesn't matter. No, I'm not going to try any tofu buffalo wings. No, thank you. Nothing against vegans or veganism or being a vegetarian, anything like that. Absolutely. I have nothing against it. Nothing against it. It's just there's no such thing as a meat substitute that tastes as good as real meat. There just isn't. Now, that said, the Impossible Burger, which is made from mostly eggplant, is awesome. It's as close as you can get. The Impossible Burger, you get at all sorts of restaurants. It's a meat substitute based on eggplant and stuff. It's actually really, 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 really good. But do you know what is really, 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 really better? Beef! So, anyway, Sony Xperia, if you're still listening, you haven't turned the dial now or gone to the next, listen to the Waveform podcast or something like that. Anyways, the Sony Xperia 1 Mark IV. Why is that the phone that I'm most leaning towards? Why has that tickled my fancy, so to speak, or got my geek antennas vibrating? The professional applications of the cameras. Basically, the Sony Xperia 1 Mark IV is a camera that Sony has put a phone on. It's a camera first, phone second. And in fact, if you watch any review or read any review about the Sony Xperia 1 IV, it's basically the reviewer saying, well, the cameras in here and the software for the cameras are exceptional. They're just the best out of any phone system available on planet Earth. It's basically like having a Sony Alpha whatever mirrorless camera, but attached to a smartphone. The features, the professional settings you can dial in, it's above and beyond. But they can't in good conscience recommend it to almost anybody because it's not user friendly for just somebody who wants to take their phone out of their pocket and snap a picture like you do with an iPhone or like you do with a Samsung Galaxy, whatever. The Xperia line of smartphones, the Xperia 1 Mark IV especially, is catered toward photographers and cinematographer professionals. That is, first and foremost, its main name of the game is exceptional video quality, exceptional photo quality, and above and beyond the settings you need to capture the best possible. It is not really a point and shoot, a smartphone, point and shoot camera phone. It is get a lot of set up your ISO, set up your your shutter speeds, do the 180 rule, all sorts of things, all the settings you can do. I don't think it has variable aperture. That is one of the biggest drawbacks of smartphone cameras, by the way, just in a nutshell, just in a broad stroke here, is that you don't have adjustable aperture for the most part. There are some phones, probably, yes, that can adjust the aperture a little bit. And by a little bit, I mean by like between 1.4, if you're lucky, if you have a smartphone with 1.4 f-stop, that can go up to like 2.5 or something like that. You have maybe one stop of aperture to deal with in one like the best smartphones in the world that offer such a feature. So I'm just saying, in general, smartphone cameras, one of the reasons why they're just subpar to dedicated cameras and DSLRs and mirrorless cameras is that you can't adjust aperture. So what draws me to the Xperia 1 Mark IV is that still there's really not any adjustable aperture, but you do have adjustable optical focal lengths. So off the top of my head, it's like a 3 or 4 camera system. I'm blanking out. I really should pull it up on my bottom screen here. Let me move Flight Simulator out of the way. I've got Flight Simulator streaming on my M1 MacBook Pro from my Asus G14 over my home network. That's how I play Flight Simulator 2020 on my MacBook. And I am just kind of telling you how I do that because I'm bringing up the Sony Xperia 1 4 here so I can see the camera, see the specs, kind of talk to you about it a little bit more. All right. GSM Arena is one of the best websites to look at smartphone and tablet facts and specs. Okay, so the camera system, I see it looks like 3, and then it's got like a infrared and depth of like eye tracking cameras and stuff like that on it. So 3 main cameras. The focal lengths, I didn't know I get into the nitty gritty of this. The focal lengths. Can you just zoom? What is it with Mac what is the macro on Mac to let you zoom into web pages? Can somebody tell me that? I probably look at it off the air. I just realized I didn't know that. On a PC, it's just control and then you do the mouse wheel up and down, but that is not the case with a MacBook. All right, so let's look at the sizes of the cameras here. Scrolling down a little bit. My goodness, I did not know that I clicked on every picture in the entire known universe. Okay, so the main camera is 24 millimeters, and then you also have a 16 millimeter ultra wide camera. So 24 millimeter is like a good walking around street photography focal length. You also have the 16 millimeter, which is ultra wide, gets a whole lot of bend the earth style, wide view of the world. It's not really a run and gun focal length. But what has me the most excited for this phone, the most excited, is that optical variable focal length lens that lets you zoom from, it starts at 85 millimeters, which is an awesome portrait focal length. I like to do sit-down interviews at 85 millimeters because it gets you get the subject real nice and sharp. So you can do on a traditional camera, you do like an f5.6, f8, maybe even f11. But with an 85 millimeter, you can do that aperture, but the focal length allows you to be at that aperture and still have a nice blurred background so that your subject can stick out from the background and really pop against the setting that they're in. So that's really great use of 85 millimeter. But if you want even more of that effect, it telephotos optically, not digitally, optically. There's glass and prisms that move around in the camera up to 125 millimeter focal length. Here's why that's important. I'm not going to go over every single other spec of the phone. 120 hertz display, the sound system, the DACs and the audio of the Xperia are the best in the world. They still have a headphone jack, 24-bit, 192K. It's exceptional audio quality. But back to the cameras. Where smartphone cameras fall apart, because you might be thinking, well, I look at phone pictures on my iPhone, that looks great. I look at the pictures on my Samsung Galaxy or my Google Pixel or whatever. They look awesome. They look amazing. You look them on social media, awesome. They're perfect for social media posts. They're perfect for putting things up on Instagram. They're perfect for TikTok videos. They're good for social media posts, but they are not good for professional applications. Once you put them into a video editor or a photo editor and when you try to zoom in, when you're editing, that's when the image falls to pieces. It's horrible quality once you start zooming in and out and punching into an image. It all falls apart. Color grading sucks also because there's so much compression going on with the photos and the videos. This is why the Xperia kind of stands and shines. I'm going to talk more about it in the next segment. Don't go anywhere. Geek Therapy Radio. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. I am going to wrap up my thoughts on the Sony Xperia 1.4, and I don't have the phone. This is not a review of the phone. These are just reasons why I'm leaning towards getting it as my next phone, as a person who otherwise is unimpressed with smartphone technology in general. If you have a 5-year-old smartphone, you're still just fine. There's not much difference between a 5-year-old smartphone and a brand new smartphone. A little bit better cameras, a little faster processing, but for day-to-day use, there's not $1,000 of difference between a 5-year-old smartphone and a brand new smartphone. There just isn't. So for me to be interested in upgrading my smartphone, there has to be some other niche aspect of a phone to make me interested in it. So the Sony Xperia 1 Mark IV is a camera with a phone attached to it. That is how Sony designed it. It's just like one of their Sony, digital cameras, their FX6s and 9s and alpha cameras and whatever like that. It's not, obviously the camera's not going to be that good as a $20,000 camera or whatever, but Sony is an excellent camera company. Everybody listening to this has probably had a Sony point and shoot, probably had a Sony Walkman, probably had a Sony CD player, probably had Sony Handycams, 8mm camera. You've used a Sony device. Sony headphones. Sony obviously is one of the top gadget manufacturers in the world. They changed the world with the cassette Walkman. Sony's established. Everybody listening right now has owned and used or currently uses a Sony product. Not everybody has a Sony smartphone. In fact, Sony has a tiny, almost non-existent share of the smartphone market compared to Apple and Samsung. And then you have the Googles and the Asuses and things like that. But anyways, so the Sony Xperia 1 Mark IV, it's focused on being a professional camera. So you have that the wide angle lens, you have the 12 millimeter wide angle lens. Was it 12 millimeters? I'm so sorry for doing this to y'all. 24 millimeter, and then you have the 16 millimeter, ultra wide, and then you have the 85 millimeter to 125 millimeter telephoto. By the way, the f-stop on that 85 to 125 millimeter goes from f2.3 at 85 millimeters up to f2.8 at 125 millimeters. So let me repeat that again in case I got it wrong. f2.3 at 85 up to f2.8 at 125. Okay, that's right. You can record 4K video, 120 frames per second in HDR. The screen is 120 frames per second with a 240 hertz input processing rate. So the specs are awesome. The screen actually is HDR rated to, it doesn't say on here, but it's a 4K screen effectively. It's 1644 by 3840, which is overkill for a 6.5 inch display. Overkill for a 6.5 inch display. The chip inside of it, the processor, is the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 with a 4 nanometer process. It's got all the latest. The GPU is the Adreno 730. Latest and greatest everything. You know, it is just a flagship smartphone. It has the best processor available at the time and the best cameras. So I've been talking about the cameras quite a bit and why that has got me the most interested in the Sony Xperia 1 IV. It took too much digging, in my opinion, to find out this information. What I wanted to know as a professional videographer, cinematographer, whatever you want to call it, for the museum, that's what I'm paid to do. Does it have 10-bit? Can I record in 10-bit? And can I record relatively flat profiles that I can color grade later? Most importantly, the 10-bit. 10-bit is going to allow you a lot of headroom and leeway to shape the color and how the image looks. And yes, the Sony Xperia 1 Mark IV records in 10-bit. Now you might be thinking, Johnny, I've got an S22 in that, I don't know this for a fact, but it also can record in 10-bit. Maybe it can, maybe it can't. I don't know. I haven't checked. I don't have it right in front of me. But I know for a fact the Sony Xperia 1 Mark IV does record in 10-bit video, which is a boon for video editing. The other boon for video editing is not just that all these cameras use Zeiss optics. It's that telephoto lens, that it's a true telephoto, that when you zoom in from 85 millimeters to 125 millimeters, it's not digital. The image isn't falling apart and getting pixelated and terrible looking as you're zooming in. It's optical. The picture is still nice and sharp. It stays razor tack sharp between the focal lengths of 85 millimeters and 125 millimeters. And that focal length, having the 16 millimeter wide lens, the 24 millimeter it's 16 millimeter ultra wide, the 24 millimeter wide, and then the 85 to 125 telephoto. It's just like having an arsenal of camera lenses in your bag. That's so extremely useful. And this is the appeal of the Xperia 1 Mark IV to me, is that now I can go to shoots, and I can go to shoots and plan on bringing less depending on the shoot. It's like, well, I don't really need the S5 for this. I know I have a camera I can depend on for editing in my pocket, and that is the real selling point for me, is to have a camera in my pocket that's already attached to the phone, that I know that in an instant, that whenever the opportunity arises, that I know when I take I'm not sacrificing a whole lot of quality to take a video on my camera. Right now, even with the best smartphones in the world, you're sacrificing things, especially if they can't record in 10-bit, especially if they don't have optical zoom or optical, a lot of focal lengths. There's a lot of compromise you make. And yes, I hear you. professional videographers, professional photographers, there are compromises you make using even the Sony Xperia 1 Mark IV. For instance, I talk about the aperture that you can't really adjust. That's one of the things. Also, the image sensor. That's a huge thing. The image sensor size is almost everything. You cannot fit a huge image sensor into cameras. Into smartphones. You can fit 1-inch sensors and bigger sensors and 4x3s and micro four thirds and all sorts of different crops and everything that you can fit into a normal standalone camera. There's only so much real estate in a smartphone, though. There are some cameras, I forget which, I think the Sony Pro 1, Pro I or something like that, touts, and there's a Xiaomi 12S that touts a 1-inch sensor, camera sensor. That's not really true. It's a derivative of their of a Sony 1-inch sensor, but it's a huge crop factor. You're not actually pulling in all the light and getting all the depth of field that a real 1-inch sensor uses. So that's one of the compromises. That's one of the biggest compromises with using a smartphone, even the smartphone camera, even one as good as a Sony Xperia 1 Mark IV, is that the sensor size is just, it's not that big. It is not as big as a dedicated mirrorless or a DSLR camera. It can't be. There's physical limitations. It can't be that big. That is one of the drawbacks. But one of the pluses, again, because it's all about pros and cons. The pro is 10-bit video recording, 120 frames per second, 4K on all cameras, and those optical focal lengths of 85 to 125 millimeters means that there will be more instances in my life where my job can be easier because I don't have to lug around my Panasonic Lumix S5 and a big giant 85 millimeter cine lens and all that stuff when I know, you know what? The phone in my pocket, the camera in my pocket will do just fine here, and I can pop out the SD card, it's a toolless SD card, which is awesome. You're listening as a photographer, videographer, thinking, holy crap, a phone that is a toolless SD card removal so that you can offload all your images easily to your computer. That's also a huge boon for professionals and creatives. So there's all sorts of things. The Xperia 1 Mark IV is just the least amount of compromises for video and photos versus all of the competition. No, it is not as good as a Lumix S5. It is not as good as a Sony FX6, but it is also much better than any other camera smartphone out there. It is less compromises than an S22. It is less compromises than an iPhone 13, and it is way less compromises than my Note 9. I will actively avoid using my Note 9, even though it takes awesome video stuff. I just know editing is going to be a nightmare and it's not going to hold up. You are worthy of love. Thank you for listening to Geek Therapy Radio, and I'll talk to you next time. Go Battleship Texas!